The Egyptians, 4000 BC to 3000 BC, the first settlers on the Nile. Picture 1. Thousands of years ago, the Sahara was a well-watered plain where wild animals lived. Stone Age people lived there too and hunted the animals. Picture 2. Slowly the climate changed and the Sahara became a desert. People and animals had to search for a water supply. Some of them reached the land we call Egypt. Picture 3. In these times, the valley of the river Nile was a marshy jungle where dangerous animals lived on the edges of the valley for safety. Picture 4. After a while, the hunters learned to tame animals rather than hunt and kill them. They domesticated dogs, cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, and donkeys. Picture 5. The number of people grew, and they were able to clear land near the river and build villages there. They found out how to plant seeds and grew wheat, barley, and vegetables. They also discovered how to make pottery, spin and weave flax to make linen clothes, and use metals like copper and gold to make tools and weapons. Picture 6. Every year in July, the floodwaters from the south burst the Nile's banks and soaked the hard, dry ground. The flood lasted several weeks and was called the inundation. In the picture you can see at the top, before the inundation, everything's dry. During the inundation, everything is flooded. Picture 7. The ancient Egyptians discovered how to save enough of this flood water to last the whole year. They cut canals and ditches which stored the water and carried it to the fields. Picture 8. Egypt becomes one land. Gradually, communities in the Nile Valley joined together. By 3200 BC, Egypt had just two kings, one in Lower Egypt and one in Upper Egypt. Then they fought a battle which was won by Upper Egypt. A new capital was built for the united land at Memphis. This is picture 9. As ruler of the two lands, the king wore the double crown. He also carried the crook and flail to show he was a shepherd and defender of his people. Now look at the stone tablets. Here you can see the two sides of King Narmer's palette. The pictures carved on it show Narmer, king of Upper Egypt, defeating the king of Lower Egypt and claiming to be king of the whole land. In the top picture, you can see King Narmer wearing his white crown. At the very top, it has the name Narmer in Egyptian. It has a picture of the god Horus helping Narmer as a bird, and a man on his knees, which is the defeated ruler of Lower Egypt. In the bottom picture, or tablet, it has a picture of the beheaded enemies, and it has a picture of King Narmer wearing the red crown. Now look at the map of Egypt. Egypt is a long, narrow, and very fertile country. In the north, the country widens into the area known as the Delta. This map shows the borders between Upper and Lower Egypt before the country was united in about 3120 BC. At the box at the lower right, it talks about the king's name. The Egyptians thought it rude to refer directly to the king, so they spoke of the great house. The picture signs or hieroglyphs for this in Egyptian writing are, it shows the box and something that looks a little bit like a fish, and is pronounced Per-O. The word Pharaoh, which we use for Egyptian kings, comes from this. The farmer's year. Picture 1. In July, the waters of the Nile began to rise. The land flooded, and the animals had to be moved to higher ground. By November, the water had gone down. The damp earth was broken up with digging sticks, plowed and sown with seed. Picture 3. Egypt has very little rain. The fields were watered with flood waters which had been stored in canals. Picture 4. The crops grew during the winter. Tax officials measured the crop and decided how much of it the farmer must pay as tax. Picture 5. The crop was harvested in the spring. The farmer's family helped with this. Picture 6. Cattle were used to separate the grain from the stalks. The grain was tossed so the husks would blow away. Picture 7. The grain was stored in the granaries in huge bins called silos. The scribes checked that none of it was stolen. Picture 8. The irrigation canals and ditches then had to be repaired and made ready for the next flood. Picture 9. During the inundation, some farmers worked on the Pharaoh's building projects. This was part of the tax they owed him. Food and drink. It was the prayer of all Egyptians that, in the next world, they would have all the good things to eat and drink they had known in life. The Nile provided much of their food. They used nets to trap wild ducks, geese, and other water birds that lived in the reeds and caught many kinds of fish from the river. Birds were also raised on farms where they were forcibly fattened for the table, like the stork in this picture. The eggs of these birds were eaten too. Meat. Egypt had little good pasture, so cattle raised for meat were often fattened in stalls. This wooden model of a cow stall came from an Egyptian tomb at Thebes. Wine making. Grapes were grown on trellises. To make them into wine, they were put into troughs and the juice was trodden out. The treaders clung to ropes to keep them from slipping. Wine jars had inscriptions on them saying where the wine came from and when it was produced. These are often valuable as historical evidence. Bread. Wheat and barley were ground into flour between two stones. To make bread dough, the flour was mixed with water. Flavorings, such as garlic or honey, were added to the dough. Then it was packed into clay pots and baked in a fire. Some loaves were only lightly baked, then mixed with water and passed through a sieve to make beer. The beer often needed straining before it was drunk, and special pottery strainers were made for the purpose.